Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Freedom Report podcast. I'm your host, Austin Peterson, and today is a very special episode. Today is our Advancing Liberty Summit, and I'm here with a bunch of exciting people who have been writing for the Libertarian Republic. Some people since the very beginning have been here. Some people are brand new, and you probably are familiar with some of the columns. They may have trolled your Facebook feed before, but I'm going to go ahead and let them introduce themselves. If we could start with Drew, and then we'll go to Casey, Josh, Keith, Lena, and Ryan, and then I'm told my friend Obbins will join us pretty soon. So, Drew, please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, my name is Drew Rushford. I'm a financial planning application consultant. I build applications for Fortune 500 companies. My latest article for the Libertarian Republic, I believe, was How Liberals Killed Eric Garner. Basically, the idea behind that is that we have a total state that the police will enforce any law on the books with deadly force if need be, and nothing stopping them back, and it's actually our culture that promotes that sort of activity and behavior.
Casey?
My name is Casey Bennett, and I am a young journalist living in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. I was a chase producer for Canada's sadly now defunct Sun News Network up until recently, and now I'm writing for the Libertarian Republic, and one of the most recent columns I wrote was about high schoolers who want a communist-themed prom, because they obviously do not understand what communism is, and how breakfast, lunch, and dinner is secretly racist. KKK members.
We were talking about that. All right, so what about you, Josh? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, my name is Josh Gugert. I am a 23-year-old, newly minted member of the Libertarian Republic. Been writing for about a month and a half now. I'm a second-year law student at the University of Pittsburgh. And
go to Pitt!
Yeah, hail to Pitt.
Yeah,
and
H to P.
My most recent articles have been about Oklahoma moving to privatize marriage, and also I've made quite a few number of listicles, including top 10 Milton Friedman quotes, which was very interesting, and somebody I really admire, Milton Friedman, and also Thomas Sowell. I did the same list for him, and they were both very interesting, able to research a lot of the great things that they said.
All right, great. Now, Keith, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks, Austin. My name's Keith Farrell. I'm a freelance writer. In addition to working here for the Libertarian Republic, I've been published at the Daily Caller, PJ Media, Liberty Chat, a slew of other places. I've been helping Austin out for a couple of years now, off and on again, when I have the availability. A recent piece that I wrote for the Libertarian Republic was Obama plans to nationalize the police, which looks at national funding requirements that tie policy and standards to those fundings in a way that the bureaucrats in D.C. are looking to have more influence on local policing, and that caused quite a stir.
Excellent. Lena, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm Lena Bryce, and I'm a newborn baby at TLR. I just I scour the web for the most interesting, thought-provoking articles that I think that you all might want to read about, and maybe even look at it from a libertarian perspective. I am a mom by day, and at night I have an alternate ego, and I just become this libertarian warrior. I'm actually a little more conservative, so I guess that's I don't know where that falls in the degree of everyone else, but I do get involved in the Republican Party locally, but looking to reform. So yeah, we're hoping. I'm hoping that my work here with Austin at TLR and communicating with all of you and networking, it'll help to sharpen my skills. Also, I did some recent articles on how streaming is killing TV, and we all know that. I think it's something we all knew already, and they just decided to write about it and said, hey, you know, TV's dying. People aren't really watching TV anymore. And I'm thinking that's probably going to make the next election pretty interesting.
Yeah, they say actually that Facebook is now more important than television advertising in terms of getting the message out.
Yeah.
All right, so we're all doing introductions now, and I saw that our friend Obbins O'Brien, the token libertarian feminist, joined us. But we got to get one more person to get through. Ryan, if you could introduce yourself, and then we'll move on to Obbins.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Ryan Carrillo. I'm one of the newest contributors here at the Libertarian Republic. I'm from Toronto, Canada as well, and also was a producer on the now defunct Sun News Network. I used to work with Casey. I'm always been a champion for liberty. You know, especially here in Canada, it's kind of hard to be a center of right. It's not really a popular thing right now, but it's an uphill struggle. I'm sure you libertarians know that. And one of the recent articles I've done was men who do hold the door open for women are sexist, but also men who don't are sexist as well. And, so you can't win.
You can't win.
I almost spit my beer all over the screen. All right.
Once you say man, you've already said sexist. I mean, that's what it means,
Right.
right?
We need a new word, man.
All right, Ovens,
It's redundant at this point to say man and sexist in the same sentence.
We've teed you up perfectly, Ovens, so introduce yourself.
Introduce myself. Hi, I'm Avens O'Brien. I've been writing for Libertarian Republic for, 2 weeks now, Austin? The token feminist, right? I live in Los Angeles. I grew up in New Hampshire. I'm a second-generation libertarian. And yeah, so I don't know. I've been fighting for the libertarian cause, both in actual elections. I've worked for various politicians, and I also write and commentate on numerous subjects. So, yeah, that's what else should I be adding to this description?
That's it. All right, guys. So this is how this is going to work. We'll have a little bit of anarchy at the end of the show where anything goes. But for the beginning part, what I'd like to do is to get everybody's thoughts on the topics, the questions we're going to have. And if you feel like you want to jump in or you want to hop into someone and say something, feel free to do so. But let's try and keep it civil, and I might moderate any debates that arise. But for the most part, I'm going to toss questions. I'm going to toss questions out, and I'm going to point to the person and say, "Hey, answer the question for me," and then we can go at it a little bit, and then I might toss to other people and make sure that everybody gets a voice. But try and keep your answers short and succinct, and of course you can feel free to debate each other, call each other status, yell at each other. That's fine. Just try and keep the profanity to a minimum so that my advertisers don't jump ship, please.
Status.
All right.
Oh, God damn it.
Censoring.
So the very first thing that I want to talk about are the two important topics, the things at the top of the list here. What's awesome in liberty right now? What's happening right now in the world of liberty that's a positive? And then we're going to talk about what sucks for libertarians and what sucks for liberty in general. So the first thing, I'll go ahead and start. What's awesome right now for libertarians? I think the idea that the New York Times, even if they're bashing us, and that the mainstream media is actually saying the word libertarians, people like Rand Paul are using the word libertarian to describe themselves in interviews with Fox News, and that Rand Paul actually has a shot at the nomination, even though a tiny little infinitesimal one. I think that that's good for libertarians. I know that the political process, some people eschew the political process, but perhaps maybe there could be a change if we were able to take over the Republican Party. So I see Rand Paul right now as one of the things that's good for libertarianism. And let's welcome my buddy Grant Phillips. Grant, we'll give you a chance to introduce yourself.
Sorry.
No worries. We'll give you a chance to introduce yourself in a minute because you were bad and late. We'll get to you later. So Drew, what's awesome in libertarianism or liberty right now?
I've got a few items. Number one on my list is technology, because there are a lot of things coming out right now, 3D printing, open source technology, self-service apps like Robinhood with zero-fee stock trading, self-service apps that allow people the freedom to make choices without having to go through the institutions that currently exist. And I think that allows people, a perspective that allows them to say, hey, maybe freedom's actually pretty good if I can do all these things myself. Second thing is that gun laws are getting less restrictive around the country. It's a general trend. If you just look at the history, recent history, it's getting better. In my state of Texas, open carry is probably going to be passed, so I'm pretty happy about that. Two more items. I swear it'll be quick. The effects of Obamacare. I was doing the math on the penalties. Oh, man, the penalties are so low for a lot of people who are, I guess, above maybe $50,000, $75,000 that people are just going to say, okay, I don't want to buy health care. I'll just pay your fine. And I think that's really going to hurt Obamacare. And, of course, the last thing is just Hillary Clinton. She's just imploding. And it's great. Not only for libertarians, it's more like it's bad for Democrats and liberals. So by proxy, it's good for libertarians.
It's good for America.
Yes. The world, the planet.
Ovens, what's good in liberty?
I'm going to give a really, really weird answer to this. It's Barack Obama. And the reason for that is because after 8 years of Bush, you know, Democrats got this impression that they were the good guys. And I think that, you know, they talked about civil libertarian ideas as, you know, Obama was trying to be elected, and then he kind of failed on all of those things. And as a result, I think that Barack Obama has been a great thing for liberty, because we had 8 years of Bush, we had 8 years of Obama, and a bunch of people are going, there's no difference. There's nothing appreciably different about these two things. And so what's the solution? The solution is liberty. So.
Casey, what's good in liberty?
Well, I wanted to take this more from a Canadian angle, and this is something that I've always envied Americans for. You can buy beer and alcohol in grocery stores, and we cannot do that here, at least in my province of Ontario.
Except for in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, Pennsylvania sucks
Not
about
in
that.
Virginia. Not in Virginia.
No 18 packs in PA.
I know New
Certainly
Jersey.
not
We're
here.
in the conversation. This is supposed to be positive.
Okay, so what's good in liberty, though? Is there anything positive you could say, Casey? What do you look at as a beacon of hope?
Well, our government has decided, our provincial government has just decided to allow beer and wine sales in major grocery stores across the province, which is a huge step forward, and it's not 100%. But because we have a beer monopoly here where you can only buy, you know, certain packs up to a certain number at certain stores because of a deal that was worked out secretly behind everyone's backs, it's really a step forward to smashing that monopoly and giving us freedom, beer freedom.
So we know now that
I'm okay with that.
Good. So we now know that Casey is an alcoholic. Grant.
Basically.
And she's only going to get better now.
Better. It's only up from here.
We're all getting prettier.
Grant, briefly, what's good in liberty?
Well, I would have to say the changing marijuana laws. That has been a sweeping thing that's happened very quickly compared to other laws. Healthcare is obviously taking a turn for the worse. Education's taking a turn for the worse. But if there's one shining light, I have to say marijuana laws. We have Rand Paul and his Redeem Act going on right now. That's where I'd have to say is, and that probably has the biggest hope for a fiscal positive change as far as the federal budget goes. And so I'd have to say drug laws in general.
Yeah, smoke 2 joints in the morning. I smoke 2 joints at night.
Why do you think I'm late?
We got an alcoholic. We got an alcoholic. We got the pothead. All right, Josh, Mr. Suit and Tie Man, what's good in liberty?
As was spoken about, Rand Paul is not just as a potential presidential candidate, but just as a United States senator right now is really doing some unbelievable stuff between the Careers Act, between the Redeem Act, and Audit the Fed, which has been spoken about in the House of Representatives for eons. And then at CPAC, he talked about advocating for the largest tax cut in American history, which we'll have to see what that ends up being. And also, just as was also spoken about, is these young kids talking about yes we can. They were all hyped for President Obama, and it turns out he's just like Bush. And people are starting to realize that, and especially as Hillary Clinton versus Jeb Bush becomes nearer and nearer, it's sort of a positive by a negative. Is that we talk about all these things that are bringing people to light and making people realize how much the same these Republicans and Democrats are, even though as much as they claim to be so much different. I think that's a real positive. And then on the contrast, you have Rand Paul.
Yeah, so we now know that Josh is the Rand Paul sellout status. Good.
Mm-hmm.
We got the alcoholic, the pothead, the sellout. Almost. All right, Keith, what's good? What's good, man?
Well, I too think that Rand Paul is doing good things for liberty, but I'm more focused on what he's doing to work with people like Cory Booker across the aisle to do criminal justice reform and engaging black Americans on topics about how the criminal justice system is unfair. He's also taking that message of liberty and economic freedom to inner city populations, which the GOP have tended to ignore in the past. So I think that speaks to great progress as far as the message of liberty inside the GOP, and hopefully with Americans that haven't heard that message.
All right, Lena.
Well, I was actually gonna say technology like Andrew, but to go on piggyback on that, I think that social media has been a really, you could say a curse and a blessing, but knowing that people are turning to streaming more and TV less, which is how politicians were sold to us traditionally. I think that is going to be a good thing. And when you look at how social media is working to create communities of outreach and volunteers and just giving information that you don't normally get through the mainstream, it does a lot. It's probably not great strides, but it's making it's making an improvement in how we communicate ideas, how we talk about ideas. I mean, Austin, you're like a rabble rouser. You like to stir the pot, but at the same time, it's stirring up conversation, and I think that's what was missing.
All right, Ryan Carrillo, what's good?
Well, I was going to say the same thing as Grant, the decriminalization and legalization of marijuana. And the reason is because it speaks to a growing trend for personal liberty, the idea that the government doesn't have a right to tell you what to eat, drink, or smoke. And, for a lot of young people, right, they just want to get high. That's like, it's just the
get high and have sex and drink.
Exactly. That's the end-all be-all of why they want legalization. But you can use this as a jumping-off point, I think, to have discussions about personal liberty and government interference. And having those kinds of avenues open to these kinds of discussions with younger generations is good for liberty and good for libertarians and for the movement.
All right, well, let's keep this roundtable moving. Go back to Drew. Drew, why don't you tell us, what do you think sucks about liberty right now?
Well, I think one thing that sucks for liberty is that the regulators are coming for our technology, this new technology, Bitcoin, drones, items like that. So it's definitely piqued the interest of those nanny staters and just outright, social tyrants. So that's one thing that I think is pretty terrible for liberty. But at the same time, it cuts both ways. As more and more people use this cool stuff, they're not really affiliated with any cause. And then when they hear, hey, the government's going to come down on you because you're using Bitcoin or your drone or this, it'll push them. So I think that's a murky subject. I don't know if it's good or bad, but I think it's bad. And I think what's bad about liberty today is the influx of leftists that are diluting the message, telling people that they're bad libertarians if they're not social justice warriors. You saw this happen with the Atheism Plus movement, where if you weren't, a hand-holding hippie saying kumbaya, then you couldn't actually be a good atheist. And atheism wasn't really about trying to be equal. It's about using reason and whatever. And so I think libertarianism is more about being anti-state and anti-certain things that statists believe and make them want to pass laws like racist beliefs. And that's because there are laws that are passed by people who are anti-racist, who are progressive, and those are bad laws too that harm people. So I think that really sucks. It's that they're diluting the message and they're giving progressives a foothold to argue against libertarians, when libertarians should really be focusing on the state. And whatever motivations people have for establishing a state, if they're dirty capitalists, if they're dirty socialists, if they're racist, anti-racist, the end result, a state, is a bad thing. And that's what we really need to focus on, keep focusing on.
Ovens, you want to respond to that? You social justice warrior, you?
You know what's funny is actually my point that I was going to say for this answer was that there's this false dichotomy where you have people on the right and people on the left who are coming into liberty, and you have people on the right who are like, those social justice warriors aren't libertarians, even if they don't suggest state solutions for things. And on the left, you have people being like, well, you're not really a libertarian if you don't care about these issues. And it's obnoxious because at the end of the day, the only thing that qualifies people to be libertarian in my book is, hey, you don't want to aggress upon other people. And so, if people want to take up leftist solutions, like leftist solutions that don't involve government, so they want to say like, hey, we want to battle racism, or we want to battle, systemic oppression, or whatever, as long as they're not using government to do so, I think that it's important that those conversations exist within the liberty movement. I do hate when people go like, well, you're not really, like, the libertarian movement is lacking because X, Y, and Z, and they get all angry about it. But I do think there is an essential component to that conversation that I'm glad is happening, but I really wish people would be so, like, less extreme. Like, I don't sit there and accuse people who are on the right of being, not libertarians because they're, religious or whatever, and vice versa. Like, I think there's too much dichotomy. Anyway.
All right, Ovens, you're not libertarian, but Casey, just kidding. Casey, what sucks right now about the libertarian cause? What's not good right now for liberty?
Well, again, I wanted to take this more from a Canadian angle, but this is the broader issue affects basically everyone in the Western world, and that's terrorism. And here in Canada, we've introduced Bill C-51, and that's basically anti-terrorism legislation that gives our Secret Service, CSIS, the ability to expand its powers, broaden its powers, and by extension the government, to track down suspected or would-be terrorists. And I'm sort of nuanced about this because I believe that we need to do something about terrorism, but when you're introducing all of these laws and you're cracking down on privacy, I mean, look at what happened with the body scanners in American airports. It was introduced as a method of safety, as a means of safety, at least that's what the public was told, but in the end it really wasn't very effective. So I don't think that this is a very good thing for liberty, to be cracking down on people's privacy and on their basically their ability to be almost safe and secure in an ironic way. So that's my position on that.
Grant, what's not good for us libertarians right now?
Well, from a liberty standpoint, I like to look at the economics of liberty, and I would have to say monetary policy. I think we are in a period of a completely falsified recovery. We've basically pumped the economy full of money just to make it look good, and it is very politically feasible. And I think the Fed, audit the Fed, I think audit the Fed is a great idea. I don't think it'll accomplish anything ultimately. It's just going to tell us what we already know. And I think that that is going to be very detrimental to us in the long term. And I'm not sure if anyone can possibly fix that. I've never really heard any solutions to how you can fix quantitative easing or zero interest rate policy. But that will hurt everything else that we talk about as far as liberty goes, from foreign policy to domestic policy to everything, because they literally control, the state controls the economic outcomes as far as money goes, and I think that will be a major issue within the next 5 to 7 years.
All right, Keith, what sucks for us right now, bro?
Well, I think we're at a stage where the movement is starting to go more mainstream. And what I've seen is that there's a lot of ideological purists and fringe types who would rather obstruct real progress than actually see the movement go mainstream. And all you have to do is look at the Libertarian Party's attack on Rand Paul last week or the week before, where they linked, they said no more Paul, Bushes, or Clintons, as if the Paul family has been this plague to America like the Clintons and Bush. It isn't honest, and it doesn't help us accomplish any real goals. I think that passing up a cheeseburger because we want to hold out for a steak is not good policy. I think we have to be more pragmatic. And I think there's too many of those ideological purists which are too willing to blame America first for anything. And I think that bias sometimes leads them to support or excuse the actions of people like Vladimir Putin, who should be denounced as an enemy to liberty. So I don't think that's good for us.
All right, Lena, what about yourself?
I think that is our biggest problem, and I think the libertarian movement's issue are people who are looking for the infighting. Can you hear me okay? Because I can't hear myself.
We can hear you just fine.
Good.
Okay, good. I think
somebody's got some background noise.
Yeah, I feel like my kids are there.
I don't know.
Yeah, some of the kids around them or something?
Yeah, somebody's.
No. For once, no.
Somebody's got some mayhem going on. I think it's Grant. Yeah, Grant, when you're not talking, mute that shit.
We're censoring you.
All right, yeah.
But yeah, basically, I think the infighting, and I don't follow a lot of the drama. I don't even know who's who, and I'm always amazed at how rude and obnoxious people can be to people that they wouldn't be otherwise face to face. Like, I always feel like I'm the same online that I am in person. And I think with libertarians, we're so open-minded, and but yet confrontational. And I think that it blows up, and then you have these people, and the other problem are trolls. The big problem in libertarianism are trolls. But you have these people like just obscuring the message. And I think the whole point is what, I believe someone, I can't remember who said it, but Rand Paul is talking about forget about purism. You know what? I think I could work with Cory Booker and get this passed. Let's work together to move towards liberty. I don't believe that it's going to happen overnight. And I think the flaw in libertarian movement is that we have this anxious there's an anxiousness that I sense, and it needs to happen now or nothing. And I don't think that's how anything changes. I think things change and progress and evolve.
All right, Ryan, what sucks for liberty right now, bro?
I'm going to say the recently passed net neutrality. The idea that in order to maintain the freedom of the internet, we need government to regulate its freedom. You know, the internet was one of the last generally free places, and now the government basically has a back door into regulating everything about it by classifying it as a utility. And I'm not even talking about the argument about whether internet traffic should be neutral or not. What really bothers me is the idea of regulatory capture, which is the political corruption that occurs when a regulatory agency created to act in the public interest, instead advances commercial or special concerns of interest groups and dominate the industry or sector that's supposed to be regulated. So that's what I think right now is one of the last great free places, the internet, is got the government tentacles reaching towards it, and I don't think that's good for liberty at all, especially for people like us who are doing all this online.
Absolutely, yeah. I get really scared when I see things like that because my entire business model is online. You know, I get a little freaked out when I see Facebook, you know, like with a new algorithm. But it's another thing when the government comes in and starts talking about regulating the internet, and then I start worrying because, you know, I'm a enemy number one, you know, and a big target for the government. If they wanted to somehow try and screw me, I would probably not be on their friends list of whitelisted sites that get you know, that get preferential treatment if there's ever a problem. But I want to move on. I had a topic pulled up. It was about how Americans name government as the thing that's their biggest problem. But I feel like, what's up, Josh? You want to say something?
I didn't get to say that.
Oh, sorry, my bad, bro. What sucks in liberty, Josh?
Well, I was just gonna talk a little bit about the culture in the United States. Is while we on the face it looks like things are becoming more libertarian, I think that, you know, younger people especially say, you know, I want gay people to be able to get married. I want to be able to smoke weed, and I don't want the government spying on my phone. But then conversely, they'll go over and say, but you know what? The government should punish people who don't want to give gay couples wedding cakes. The government schools punish these racist fraternities, and, you know, government should make sure that these greedy corporations aren't messing with our internet connections. Right. So there's sort of we have the pieces of the puzzle together. I think we have to do a job to sort of connect them together to create a more coherent ideology in order to make a more libertarian society.
Great answer. All right, so I was going to say about how I was going to move on to the next topic, but the next topic was, you know, Americans say that a government is our biggest problem. But I want to skip that topic because I feel like we've already sort of probably sussed out a lot of these issues that, you know, that we're dealing with in America. Yeah, people hate the government. They say they do, but so what? I mean, you can take a poll to say whatever the hell that is that you want to say.
Hey, Austin,
obviously.
There is something interesting about that, though, because I was reading it, and the exact phrase it said is dissatisfaction with government. And that makes me a little nervous because dissatisfaction with government, I have lots of leftist friends who are dissatisfied with government because it's not doing enough. It's not, you know, they're dissatisfied with Obama because he put up with Romney Care instead of giving us single payer. And so when people answer they're dissatisfied with government, I don't necessarily see that as, oh, they don't like government. No, sometimes it just means they don't think the government's doing enough. So that was my only point about that entire thing.
That was the exact same point I was going to make about that as well. It doesn't. It's not talking about people who are against government. Just it could be just as easily people that don't think the government is doing enough that are dissatisfied with the government. So I don't really see anything good about this poll. It's not really telling us anything.
Yeah, I commissioned a poll, and 99% of my respondents said that the United States wants some anarcho-capitalism.
Right, so.
All right. All right, so let's move on to issues that actually matter, things that are happening right now that deal with our liberties. And I'm going to throw this question out, and just anybody who wants to answer it, please do. We can have a little bit of anarchy and a little bit of fun. We're in the last half hour now. 2 police officers were shot in Ferguson. It looks like it was sort of an ambush. I guess my question here is, I mean, I look at Ferguson as not being a very good example of libertarian principles because Mike Brown, no matter what he was, the officer, Darren Wilson, was exonerated by a grand jury. And maybe you think that was unfair, maybe you don't. But I think the Eric Garner case is a much better example, but we're being forced to focus in on the shooting death of Mike Brown. So, and now these 2 police officers who've been shot, they haven't been killed. Luckily, it seems that they've been alive. But when you look at the issue in the backdrop of Ferguson, I guess I want to throw out a question. Do you think that the president or that the attorney general exacerbates these problems by trying to shine lights on the issues that aren't of real importance, and they want to ignore issues like Eric Garner because that makes them look bad? Does anybody toss that?
Absolutely.
Yeah, Keith?
I mean, I think that when elected leaders choose to fan the flames of racial tension for political gain or to craft a political narrative, it definitely creates a lot of volatility, and I think that's what happened in Ferguson. Whereas in Eric Gardner's case, as you suggested, it's more of an issue of policy and enforcement. They don't want us to focus on that because it doesn't fit with their narrative of racial discrimination, which they were trying to craft, and by doing so, they did exacerbate the situation. I don't think anybody could deny that they didn't.
Now, one thing I want to throw out there is the Department of Justice actually did uncover that one of the big problems in Ferguson was that they were writing so many goddamn tickets. They're getting so many traffic tickets. They're pulling over black people all the time, writing them these tickets. But this happens all over the country. This isn't a problem with Ferguson. Drew, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I think the problem with Ferguson is more than just the police versus black people. I mean, in New York City, 2 cops were shot, but that's a very large place. So I think the law of large numbers comes into play. But for a place like Ferguson, where the population isn't as large, I think it evidences a social breakdown that goes above and beyond just people writing tickets. It's about the economics of the situation, what opportunities people have, people feeling disenfranchised. I don't want to sound like a liberal, but it's not just the police. It's people not having opportunities, people paying taxes, people getting tickets and things like that. And I think if you look at that and you think it's really just the police, or you make it just this monistic issue where it's just one thing is the problem, you're really not going to get to the truth. There's more to it, and I think libertarians should really explore it because, why are so many black people poor around the country? Mm-hmm. I mean, there's reasons we all know. You can't be enslaved for hundreds of years and then automatically now you have the social capital and the money and everything. So I think that this evidence of the social breakdown speaks to larger problems that libertarians have been speaking about a long time, and really the police are just the tip of the government spear.
Absolutely. But Andrew, wouldn't you say that our national leaders should have injected maybe some common sense and urged restraint in the situation instead of maybe magnifying it for political gains?
Well, I mean, it's tough to tell without knowing what's in that person's mindset, because somebody who is determined to go kill police or shoot police, I don't know that you can break their exterior. I don't know that you're going to get to them. I don't think Obama's saying don't shoot police. Even if he just said don't shoot cops, please, that people are going to be like, okay, I won't shoot the cops.
True.
Yes, I don't think they should fan the flames of, in racial tensions and stuff like that. But I always think that there's going to be a bunch of crazies. It's like when people say, there are rapists everywhere. It's like, no, you can't really just teach some people not to rape because they're rapists. What you would teach them just doesn't register.
Right. Anyone else want to comment on Ferguson?
Yeah.
My question is,
I would like to
hold on, Casey first.
Okay, my question is, why is Obama getting involved in these menial issues? And ultimately, when you stack them up against everything else we're facing, that's exactly what it is, a menial issue. When he could be focusing on things like ISIS ravaging people in the Middle East, or the fact that Iran might be getting their hands on nuclear weapons, which they're guaranteed to use against Israel and the U.S.
That's racist. You can't talk about it. That's racist.
It's ridiculous. It is a bit ridiculous to even say that we have this racist, we're all racist, it's a racial issue in this country. We have a black president, people. Like, exactly. I don't.
You didn't get there without the white
racist.
But see, the problem I have, and I'm a little. I think I'm a little older than all you, but I think that I don't believe we're a country that really cares that much about skin color. It's always about what can you give me. Like, if you have something to offer and you have a good product, whatever that is, if you're a good performer, if you're a good craftsman, an artist, or a carpenter, plumber, whatever. I don't care what you are. If you do your job well, you're worth something to me. And I believe that's where we are in this country for the most part. That doesn't negate the fact that there are racist people out there. There certainly are. But on a whole, and then for the president to come out and say and comment, I don't even remember a president of the United States ever doing that, ever. I usually they stand back and let the courts work through the system, and then they don't comment personal comments on things like that. So, you know, you did have 2 officers shot. Now, I know there's a lot of cop hating, but that's a bad precedent, and it's not good. You have they're police officers that are just doing their job, standing in front of a building. People are peacefully protesting, and they're just making sure things don't get out of control, that they're doing their job. And it's a slippery slope if we just say, oh, they were asking for it. You know, this is the environment. I believe the state created this environment. The state created this hostility between civilians and cops. Probably it goes back to how they started to unionize them, and now they're entitled to all these benefits through the taxpayers' paychecks. I mean,
so
taxpayers
racist.
You're creating this.
I want to jump in on this really quick.
Right, go ahead, Grant. Go ahead, Grant.
Okay, so I think that talking about the in-the-moment idea of Ferguson is kind of moot. It's kind of completely pointless because you're really just talking about what is very obvious to me is that what Lena said is state intervention, and I think that honestly dates all the way back to integration. I think that the policies stemming from immigration really set people up for failure. I think they were egalitarian, idealistic things that really, they sound good on paper, but in practice they were just destructive as could possibly be. And I've done economic research on a National Bureau of Economic Research, INBER. I don't know if you guys ever heard of that one, where black wage growth from 1940 to 1960 was over double what it was between 1965 to 1981.
Great society.
I think, yeah, exactly, and I think that is a very telling statistic. And even in that same time period, we had black-white wage disparity was almost equal prior to that time period, and now it's obviously very different. So I think that one date, 1964, is very telling to what has now become the social idea of the quote-unquote black thug, that it's not just a decision of, oh, let me go sell drugs and be violent. No, that is individuals acting within an economic environment to where they're just responding to the incentives that they're presented with. And anybody would do it regardless of skin color. It just so happens that they got the blunt of the sword, and as hard as that is to admit, I think that is probably the single worst policy of the United States government within the last 100 years. And people will cling to it. Rand Paul has been accused of racism because of it. Ron Paul has been accused of racism for criticizing it. But I think that it really, the root cause of the problem is that in and of itself, and the minimum wage and labor unions and welfare and
racism,
public housing.
Racism.
But if I say that in public, I'm a racist, and I don't know what I'm talking about.
Am I supposed to interject? It's all the men. Is that
all right?
right
Ovens. Bring it on, Ovens.
No.
Are we not employing the progressive stack? What's wrong with us?
Lena's not a man.
I don't think so.
All right, Ovens.
She should identify herself. Don't you speak for her.
She's a man, babe.
I'm just such a patriarch.
So, Ovens, did you want to add something?
No, I was literally just trolling.
All right. Anybody else want to comment on Ferguson?
Yeah, I'll say something here. I think that even more so than the Obama administration and Eric Holder exacerbating this problem, I think really the 24/7 news media plays a huge role in everything that's happened. And I think they have a lot of blood on their hands because as they have this desire to get more ratings and to get viewers 24/7, whether it was through the Rodney King scandal, whether it was through the O.J. Simpson trial, whether it was through Trayvon Martin, whether it was through Michael Brown, Eric Garner, it's just always this desire to make it this black versus white paradigm. And then all that does is, Fox News takes the side of the officer. Like, I remember literally 15 minutes after the Michael Brown scandal broke, Sean Hannity was taking the side of the officer. He didn't know what happened. And it's the same thing on the other side. You have Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson on MSNBC and Rachel Maddow and the like, taking the side of whoever the victim is, especially if it's a disenfranchised minority. And we, as libertarians, we know that all these government policies have had disparate impacts on minorities. We don't have to be told that. We know that they have been victimized by the federal government. But at the same time, it doesn't do our society any good to continue to make these wedges between black and white, and to make this and further this hatred between the races just to further ratings and for political ploys too. I mean, it's just a matter of identity politics that the Democrats play off of and in the Republicans too. The Republicans talk about being the party of law and order. Nixon was famous for this, and that's sort of and a legacy that's continued on to this day is that everybody wants to benefit as society burns, and all the elites want to reap all the benefits, while all of the so-called, in their minds, lower classes sort of quibble back and forth about all of these issues.
People who are easily separated are also easily conquered.
Right.
All right, so I want to talk about racism. I want to talk about racism from an angle that's a little bit more controversial. I wrote a story last week, and the story was called "Students Launch Campaign Against Words That Are Hateful and Hilarious." Because, all right, so obviously racism is shitty. When somebody says, "Oh, you're the N-word," and they're being actually hateful, then I think that's the time when you ought to say, "Hey, don't be an asshole," and we ought to socialize each other properly on how not to be an asshole. But when people make jokes that maybe have racial overtones, I don't think that jokes with racial overtones necessarily mean that you're being racist. You may be making a racial joke, but I don't think that it's racist. I mean, to me, racism is when you're trying to exert power over someone, or you do exert power over someone because of their race, because you're a bigot or you're intolerant. But now all these students at the school in Shawnee Mission, Kansas, who are totally not pawns of their teachers' social agendas, I promise they're not, are all holding up signs saying things like, "An Oreo cookie is not an ethnic group." Now, please tell me that is not fucking hilarious, okay? That is fucking funny. That is hilarious. And another one, "I'm not some type of superhuman when it comes to sports," said another. And it's like, of course it's all black kids, but now there's somebody in the comment section, and they're yelling at me, and they're like, "You don't know what it's like because you're not black," and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, God damn it, like, how are we ever going to get along if we can't make jokes? If people are always yelling about racial appropriation or something like that. Like, I think this sensitivity, political correctness bullshit is making us weaker. When you're telling kids they should be offended or be sensitive, can I tell you something? When I was a kid, and kids call me faggot, or like Peter Liss, or Peter. I'm sure you've probably heard, Austin Peterson jokes, maybe my last name, at parties. But my dad was like, "Toughen up, kid." You know what I mean? It was sticks and stones. Mm-hmm. But I mean, do you think that fighting racism is really one of the most important battles that we have, Ovens?
So I knew you were going to call on me, which is perfect, because actually this I was very interested in this particular topic. First off, because high schools and what happens in high schools is really fascinating to me. And for full disclosure, I've never set foot in a high school. I was homeschooled, and I don't. Sometimes I think I'm either looking at the situation objectively because I don't project my own high school experiences on it, or I'm looking at the situation with a completely missing piece because I've never been to a high school. So what I think is interesting though is that we can blame teachers' agendas, or we can blame liberalism or political correctness for this, but I think it's something a little bit bigger than that, which is that I was trying to think of like a one word. Who do we blame for massive sensitivity? And I just think Oprah. And the reason I think Oprah is because basically with the turn your phone off. I
want to hear this Oprah point. So
the Oprah point is that, on Oprah and with numerous other talk show hosts over the last 30 years, we have people we started this confessional culture. We started this whole culture of people really talking about things that bother them. And it started with celebrities or people who had accomplished great things talking about like the adversity they faced as they were growing up, and then it became like, hey, I faced that adversity too, and you see people kind of going like, oh well, I've been called racist names, or I've had to fight against these things that I didn't talk to anybody about previously, and now there's this professional culture, so everybody talks about it. And then combine that with technology, combine that with social media, combine that with the fact that we have blogs, and we have Facebook and Twitter, and we have all these ways for us to express when we're upset about something, which we previously didn't have. If my mother was mad because a man, or like a guy didn't give her a job because she was a woman, it was 1967, and she basically was just like, well, no one's gonna listen to me, and now, like, anyone can just publish their thoughts and think that other people want to listen to them. I mean, every single person here is publishing their thoughts, hoping that people want to listen to them. And then
all right, hold on. I gotta cut you off. Gotta keep moving. Drew?
Yeah, I mean, my wife is black, so if I made an Oreo cookie joke in my house, like to my family, it wouldn't be offensive at all. But
your babies are Oreos. Your babies are Oreos.
But if you want to, I can see it like anything can be said with hostility, or anything can be said in a joking manner. So I think, the words themselves are not really what we should be fighting. It's really any instance of, hostility between people. Like you said earlier, or alluded to, how can we have an equal society if we can't make fun of each other? And that's why I like the Comedy Central roasts, where like anything goes, and it's not like everybody leaves and it's like a race riot afterward. And I think what's insidious is that millennials and liberals think they're doing something. Not to get off point, but they think that all these campaigns are creating. They're trying to destroy something that they find repugnant. And I read an article yesterday, which is good for me, for my job security, is that millennials are the least skilled group of people out there. Why is that? It's because they're all sitting online on Tumblr trying to be, I don't know, trying to project whatever social message they're trying to project. And we've made it so easy for the people to just go on the computer and like interact. And people used to be bored. People used to sit in their houses and not want to call 50 of their friends in a row to have 50 conversations. So they went and did stuff. Now it's like, oh, I can interact with the whole world all day and do nothing and make nothing of myself. And other people are going to say, oh, so brave, you're amazing. No, you suck. You're an entire generation of narcissistic fucks. You don't add anything to society.
All right, so Casey, you're next, and someone told me once that you are part Asian. So, do you get offended? Do you ever get offended if somebody's like, Chinese, Japanese, dirty knees, look at these?
Well, as much as people think that I look part Asian, I'm actually not. But
no, sorry, that was so racist of me. I'm sorry.
Wait, it's racist if she's not Asian?
It's racist. Yeah, it's always racist because it's a white
always racist.
I'm the least racist there can be. But I was just reading through, and I was looking at some of the complaints, and one of the girls was complaining because she was being stared at during, a topic on slavery in class. And, I'm not the voice of all black people. I just think this is such a petty thing to be concerned about. There are so many people in this world who are so disadvantaged, who don't even have the opportunity to go to school and learn, at least without fearing that they're going to be shot by, Islamic militants, things like that. So you're lucky that you even get to be in a classroom learning about these things. You're complaining about these horrendously first world problem, and you don't see a problem with that in itself. I just think that that's an issue. I think that people are blowing things out of proportion. I think that people are, in fact, too thin-skinned, too susceptible to offense, and offense is a choice. So if you don't want to be offended, don't choose to be.
All right, good one. We got to keep moving.
Rich kid problems.
It's poor little first world rich kid problems. True. All right, moving on. And Shawnee Mission, Kansas, by the way, is a rich neighborhood. So moving on, who is next? Is that Keith? Keith, jump in here and try and keep it snappy.
Yeah, I don't think we could have true equality until we're allowed to make fun of whoever we want for whatever reasons, right? I mean, I think one of the greatest shows on television is South Park because they unabashedly attack every single group and slaughter sacred cows every week, and that is equality. That's true liberty. Sometimes saying something that has a racial connotation to it or whatever is just funny because it's sensitive. It's funny because somebody's going to get upset, and we're just having fun. It's not necessarily coming from a place of hatred, and I think American culture revels in satire and comedy, and I think that, we're not alone there. The modern world likes to laugh, so I think everybody should kind of just lighten up a little bit.
All right, Ryan, you Canadian poutine-eating son of a bitch. What's your deal?
All right.
I just think everyone loves playing the victim. It's just it's a big game of who's the bigger victim. And exactly like other people were saying before, with social media now, everyone can just go online and complain and share their experiences. But I like Keith just said, we're not going to be equal until we have the ability to make fun of each other. Just like me and Casey, we're friends, and I don't know how many times we've said racist jokes against each other. I'm Mexican, and she throws Hispanic jokes at me all the time.
Don't be so hard on yourself. Don't be so hard on yourself. You're not.
I just laugh. I think it's hilarious.
That's an old South Park joke, by the way. That's a South Park joke.
How do you start Mexican? You had his food stamps under his work boots.
Yeah.
Can't even unpack the boxes in the background.
But you see,
It's so easy.
you know, there's no malice intended here. This is people having fun, and this is equality. Nobody's making fun of Ryan for being Mexican. We're just laughing with him, you know. So it's different. This is the sort of thing they're attacking, good-natured fun, and they shouldn't.
True, true. All right, so we've only got 5 minutes left. I want to hit this last topic before we go, guys, and this has been so much fun. We'll definitely do this again. So, Ryan, I need you to start this off. You posted a story. It shows that men are sexist if they open the door for women, but they're also sexist if they don't open the door for women. So, okay, what the hell is that all about? Can you tell us real quick?
You know, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. Basically, it was a study saying that there's such a thing as benevolent sexism.
Right.
So if you're actually nice to women, it's called benevolent sexism. If you want to pay for dinner, if you want to hold the door open for them, it's not because you're being nice. It's because you think that women are weak and incompetent beings, is what the study said.
Is that not the case?
No.
No. Now, it's a really small study.
Wait.
There's only 21 males.
Drew, you got to say something so that comes up.
Say it.
Shitlord, choose one. Shitlord, shitlord. Which one am I? That's your choice these days. Am I shitlord?
Exactly.
Ovens, are we all sexist? Are all men sexist, Ovens?
Wow.
Oh.
We're doing bad, guys.
I judge every single person by their own actions. So no, you know what's interesting though is that in feminist circles, benevolent sexism is a topic of conversation, which I've heard of this before. And you know, the idea is not supposed to be that like if he holds the door open for you, he's innately sexist, but the concept being that people who are treating women differently because they're women in terms of you know, in terms of kind of pedestaling or treating them in a particular, like, oh, you're weak, I need to help you, whatever, that there is a sexism in that. That's like the concept behind it. I'm not entirely buying it myself. However, it's the concept behind it. And then if you want to do one study, I point out that was one study saying that, oh, men are sexist whether or not, you know, like, they hold the door open or they don't hold the door open. And it's one study does not a theory make. Like, it's and
Sure.
I agree.
Well, the problem there too is that, like, there's not just the expectations, you know, that a man who holds the door open for a woman is sexist. There's the sexism of women who get upset because you don't hold a door open for them.
And I don't get when people are upset for like every once in a while someone will be like, oh, I held the door open for a woman and she's like, I can do it myself. I'm like, really? Someone bothered to be like, I can do it myself? What the hell is that? Like, if people are polite to each other, I mean, I said in that thread on that topic, like, I was like, I hold the door open for anybody if I get there first. Like, if I get to the door first, or if you're holding something, it doesn't matter if you're holding like a cane because you're old, or a baby, or groceries, or whatever you're holding, like, I'm gonna be like, hey, go through first, whatever, because I'm a polite human being. And I don't know. I think there's like the dichotomy, like the false dichotomy is kind of language where it's like, oh, we have to make this a war on something. It's like, why can't we all just be fucking polite?
Okay, Casey, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I was just gonna say what Oven said. You know, I would hold the door for anybody, male and female. I don't think that it's a sexism thing. I think it's a courtesy thing. But even if it was, you know, a sexism thing, you know, this is probably blasphemous for feminists. But I like that sort of behavior. I like it when men are men manly. I like it when men are masculine. I like
Do you like it
being
when
the
men
woman.
pay for dinner? Do you like it when men pay for dinner?
I do, and I like it when they hold the door open. I like being feminine, and I don't think there's a problem with that.
I just think it's a double standard that our motives are questioned to begin with. You know,
I know. Yeah.
Those ladies could open the door for me, and no one's going to question their motives. But if I open the door for them,
Oh well,
My girlfriend just bought me a St. Patty's Day ticket while I'm on the phone with you guys, so she's pretty much a reverse sexist, if you ask me.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
I feel sorry for men today. I do. I'm glad I'm not in the dating scene at this day and age because it must be very frustrating. Yes, the other day I heard a friend say, you know, he called me hun. Like, she was completely offended that this person working at the counter said, here you go, hun. And I'm like, that's an endearing, I think that's the issue. They're just stressing too much about words, and they're putting too much stock in them, and I think that he was just trying to be nice. And,
I think they're just looking for a reason to be outraged, really. I think that those people have a chip on their shoulder, and they're just like,
get over it.
He held it, because they construe anything as racism and anything as sexism. So, and it's almost an industry now where you write an article about how something is racist or something is sexist.
I just get angry about
3 meals a day. What?
What, Alvin?
I just get angry about people being angry for no reason.
All right,
somebody could write a book to detail the proper way for us to objectify women. Then we won't get it wrong anymore.
There's a really good YouTuber who did one of those. I'll send it to you.
Okay, great.
I don't know the right way, but I'll know the wrong way when I see it. That's really their cop-out. They can't give you a definition, but they know when you violate it.
Drew, did you have any other points you want to make? You said you had a point.
No, I just stated them. It's cool.
All right, cool. Anybody else want to make a point before we sign off?
The cops are coming. I hear sirens. Oh my god.
All right.
Whose neighborhood is that?
It's mine.
Grant. Somebody lives in a
State's
bad
coming after
It's
us.
mine.
It's Ryan.
Casey. Okay.
I'm gonna visit San Diego. Nothing's happening here.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, folks, thank you very much for joining us for the Freedom Report podcast. As always, if you enjoy the show, do us a favor, go to iTunes and subscribe. You can also find us on Stitcher if you have an Android device. And if you really love the show, you can go to iTunes and leave us a 5-star review along with a written review. Helps us to spread the message of freedom every single day. Thank you very much to my writers who are doing a fantastic job. Drew, Alvin, Casey, Josh, Keith, Lena, and Ryan, Grant, who just disappeared. Thanks to everybody for joining us for the show. Don't forget to come back every single day to your home for economic freedom and personal liberty at thelibertarianrepublic.com.